What is up, everyone? This is Ronnie, your host of the Ronnie Asani Show. My number one goal in this show is to bring you some of the most amazing and accomplished individuals in the business world to share with you some real, raw, and authentic business insights. We sit down and talk in a casual setting, nothing too serious, yet we unpack some of the most incredible ideas, concepts, and best practices. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh, and don't forget to share the love. Like, share, and subscribe. Gracias, amigos. What is up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Ronnie Asani Show. In today's episode, I'm joined by Satya Upadhyaya, Vice President, Campaign Optimization, Marketing Capability, and Change at Citi. Satya has a wealth of experience in driving agile project delivery, data and analytics capability to pioneering integrated digital solutions and delivering process efficiency, automation, and workflows for optimal customer engagement and experiences. In this episode, Satya and I sit down to discuss a whole range of marketing topics, including campaign optimization and how to use marketing technology and customer data to improve customer experience. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. How are you, sir? Thank you so much for making it. I do appreciate your time.
Pleasure having me.
Long day. It's probably 6:15, but we got a ton of things to talk about.
Exciting.
So I think maybe we can start with last week or the week before, you were at a marketing tech
symposium at the Hunter Valley.
And man, what an event that was. I kind of had a look at some of the posts, but I haven't watched. I'm not sure if you can watch, if it's public or not.
It's not public yet. I think what they're trying to do is synchronize all that and then publish that. Because it was a hybrid event,
Yes.
You had about 100 people attending that event live and about 100 odd who were actually looking it through a webcam or teleconferencing that way. So the organizers are doing a due diligence of making those clips available to the normal public in due course and time.
I'll definitely make sure I attend the next one.
It is a good conference if you are in the space of marketing and marketing technology.
Yeah.
It's really a great event that Action Media organizes.
Yeah.
Basically brings together like-minded people in the leadership between digital and marketing.
Yeah.
And it's actually in the Hunter Valley, so you're away from the stress of your day-to-day work.
Yep.
And it allows you to
drink a lot of wine
and sink in with your colleagues and talk about the challenges that you've got in a non-threatening environment and share ideas and take it from there. And then the key takeaway is that the quality of speakers that come through and the quality of content that's shared is fundamental. It's paramount in terms of what you get the learnings out from there. So you can take that and basically put that into your organization or your workplace and take it from there.
It's quite interesting. You said, being out from the city, from, where your office is, out in Hunter Valley, a lot of times learning and creativity and all the great ideas come when you're just away from the normal, day-to-day stuff.
Absolutely. They say, if you're stressed, you can't basically think creative. So sometimes there's a notion where people go out for a smoke and healthy ideas breeze in. And when they're out and they're just thinking. And for me, I used to have a scenario when I was actually in the shower. I used to think, okay, how do I solve this problem? And a lot of ideas used to come to me when I'm in the shower thinking about the problem, and the solution would come to me as enlightenment.
Interesting. I used to get ideas when I just wake up, or maybe part of my dream just as I'm waking up. And sometimes it like you've got to write it down as soon as you get up, and then it just disappears.
Right about that. I was actually talking to someone, and what they say is so this is a career coach I was talking to, yes. And what they recommend is the last thing that you do before sleep, if you're reading and thinking about it, in your subconscious mind, you're actually thinking about it, and the brain is actually working through the solution. So when you get up, you really have a solution in hand. So there you go.
Amazing. Well, you were one of the speakers I was. And rightfully so. you have a wealth of knowledge in the world of marketing, strategy, and a few other things. So today's episode, I think we can cover a few things, perhaps starting with campaign optimization.
I love the topic.
'Cause that's what you mainly focus on in your day-to-day,
Yes,
I guess.
so we're trying to run campaigns day to day. What we're learning is that how do you do test and learn? What exactly is the objective of the campaign? And then how do you actually optimize it? And optimization actually has different meaning for different people. And there are different layers of optimization and amplifications. So for example, when I used to do campaigns 10 years ago, campaign optimization was all about if you have a customer who's been part of two competing campaigns, how do you actually optimize that? So which one gets quarantined and which one gets through? So what's your contact protocols and contact rules, and how do you optimize that? That was a very long notion 10 years ago. But as we go further and further, optimization could be broken down into how do you do your campaign optimization, how do you do your channel optimization, how do you do your customer optimization. And then the whole idea is that when you do optimization, what you're trying to do is basically get better and better. And so you've done a campaign. So there's never an idea that there's a bad campaign. There's always a campaign that did not perform as per expectation. Right. And how do you actually improvise and improve upon that? And you start making some tweaks and changes in different variables that allows you to amplify your campaign. Right. At a very, very high level, you can make your changes in your segment.
Yep.
Which is your data.
Yep.
You can make changes in your creative. You can make changes in your content. You can make changes in your channel. And you exactly see how everything is performing, and then you can do your A/B testing, multivariate testing, champion challenger strategies, and so on. So that's a very high level and a broad level of campaign optimization that people do. But then you can start also looking at other variables that you want to basically measure. For example, if you basically want to do the same channels, if we, let's say I send you an SMS, I want to follow that up. Yep. Do I basically send you a follow-up SMS? So an SMS followed by an SMS, does that work? Or do I basically want to use another channel, an SMS followed by an email, or vice versa? And how does that perform? Then you want to look at your duration. So if I send you a follow-up reminder, for example, if you're doing a reminder campaign, depending on the business you're in, do you do a reminder after 2 days, after 1 day, after 1 week, after 15 days? So the frequency, that also counts in. And then you want to do the reminder in another channel or the same channel. So there are so many different variables that you can start looking at and amplifying your campaign.
So for anyone who's listening, campaign optimization, we're talking about digital marketing campaigns mainly?
It could be. So effectively, you got the good thing about digital marketing campaigns is that the measurement could be done pretty much very, very quickly. So you get the results and you are able to tweak it back. And in earlier days when you're trying to do optimization, your channels were direct mail and telemarketing, which were a long lead time and a cycle time. So by the time the responses come back, it could be a month, it could be even a year, depending on if you're a membership-based organization, how you basically collect your responses. The good thing about when you do digital channels, you have your CROs, your micro conversion and a macro conversions. You effectively get your deliverability report, your bounce backs, and you're able to get all that information very, very quickly.
Right. So when you look at campaign optimizations, obviously one of the things is return on investment, right? So how much we're spending and how much we're getting back. Return on ad spend, things like you also look at sales cycle. So from the time that we start, like from the first time we have a touch point with a lead or a visitor or a prospective customer to the time they in fact become a customer and make a purchase, how long does that cycle take?
Yes.
And how can we shorten that too? Do you also look at things like retention, or retention is completely outside of this?
No, you do look at retention as well. So you rightly said. So you start looking at the top of the funnel. So effectively, the journey starts, how do I basically convert a suspect into a prospect?
Right.
Prospect gets converted into a customer. That's how your funnel actually starts looking at. And then when you're looking at lead generation, so how many contacts did I basically make with that customer before I can convert that lead into a customer?
Right.
And how many steps did I take, and what's the cost? And effectively, the whole idea about campaign optimization is how much revenue is it generating?
Yes.
You forecast a figure.
Yep.
And you basically have a cost element associated with that. Ideally, your revenue should be more than your cost, and that's basically X time. Hopefully. And that's where the amplification needs to happen. So what you look at is that you say a baseline. I'm looking at targeting 100,000 people. Just make it up.
Yep.
And your target revenue is $1 million. That 100,000 people. So you exactly know your cost per sale or your cost per lead. And if you're not achieving that, and then you start looking at, okay, why am I not achieving that? Is that because of the creative, the content, the data? And then you start looking at your open rate. So if you're sending out to 100,000 people, and your open rate is only 2%, which means that people are just not opening your email. So there's something wrong in there. So is that your subject line, header, your tagline, that's not effective. And if people are opening that, and then your CTR is not happening, so your conversion is not happening. Is there a problem in your content? Or is there a problem in your offer? And you start making those changes so it's all about firstly gauging and engaging the viewer or the customer. And then once you've engaged them, how do you actually basically make them a call to action?
Right. I think that's one of the things that is, I think for everything there is a best practice, but there's also certain things where people do differently. And so the question or the idea or topic I want to explore with you is, how much would you spend on experimenting new channels versus investing in proven channels in terms of budget, time, human resource allocation? So let's say, you spend $100,000 a month on, 3 or 4 different channels. Let's say, just for the sake of example, Google ads and programmatic and maybe, some Facebook ads. Let's say these are your 3 main channels, right? And you go and you say, okay, well, I want to look at other ways to generate traffic because I don't want to be vulnerable. Perhaps I just want to increase my return on investment, whatever. So I'm going to look at another channel, a completely different channel. Would you put in 2% allocation? Would you do some, some research and maybe go 5%, 10%, 20%?
Good question. So there's a couple of ways to handle that problem. So one is, which is your bread and butter campaign. So that's basically, that's driving your revenue all the time. So maybe 50% of your budget is always allocated to your bread and butter campaign, which means that you want to improvise and optimize and amplify, making smaller tweaks in your bread and butter campaigns. Then you can allocate 25% of absolutely unknown territory or new innovations, which means basically it could be a fail. But how do you basically take a fail and start again from there? So that's
right.
And then 25% where you've got a little bit of hypothesis and testing where this might work and may not work. So it's proven but not tested, at least tested in your environment. So 50, 25, 25. But you always need to have at least 25% budget allocation for unproven territory that you want to wander through and get yourself, because that's where you can basically make or break.
Yeah, and this is where you can make leapfrogs and take over, or if you're ahead of the competition, you can make that gap bigger because, a lot of people tend to just keep investing in what is working.
Correct.
Until it's not.
Exactly. So let's let's rewind ourselves 10 years back. 10 years back, communication was predominantly, whether you look at retail, whether you look at banking, whether you look at telco, you look at membership-based organization, it was all direct mail. And the cost of direct mail is significant, right? And DM, and when I say DM, email was not a sort of channel.
Yep, EDM.
EDM as a result of which. And now what's happening is a lot of organizations are becoming totally digital. So their footprint on direct mail is negligible or absolutely zero. And every communication they're sending out is basically through a digital channel, which could be email or SMS. So 10 years ago, if you ask them, can you basically send out an EDM, your biggest challenge would be data. Or, well, I don't have an email address for every prospective customer or prospect that I've got. I've got a direct mail address. So I've got a mailing address and I need to basically send them a mail. And then also from a customer perspective, the reception of an EDM as compared to a DM from a customer was also different. So some people were more tangible, tactile. They wanted to read their letter, their notices that were coming from their retail organizations, banking or telcos or membership-based organization. They wanted to look and feel and read the paper as compared to reading it on an app or reading it on in digital media. I'll give you an example. Like, I'm old school, so I like reading. If I have to do something, I like to print it out and read it. My son basically wants to read PDF. So he's basically just finished high school, and I brought him a lot of books, and now he's saying, I said, do we want to save these books, or what's going to happen with this? And he says, Dad, I said I never wanted books. I can read through PDF, and I'm more comfortable reading it online in the digital space rather than the physical space. So again, customer expectations are changing as well. So I guess organizations need to adapt to those changing customer expectations.
Well, someone like your son, you're probably going to have to market to them via TikTok and maybe whatever that comes next.
Oh, TikTok, Instagram, they're quite in that Web 2.0 space.
So, okay, cool. So 25% is new territories, uncharted, things that you have never, ever done anything in.
Yeah, so...
Okay.
So if you look at, so let's, again, rewind ourselves 20 years back. When we had mass marketing, and mass marketing was all about above the line, right? And then when we talked about below the line, it was all data driven, and we had a lot of challenges with data driven marketing. And today also we have a lot of challenges with data driven marketing, and data driven marketing now has taken a new shape of analytical marketing or personalization, or if you go one step further, called hyper personalization, which is the strategic and effective use of data to basically do point-to-point conversation. But if you look at future, which is about another 5 to 10 years, you're looking at cognitive marketing, which is the interconnected devices, Internet of Things, virtual reality, augmented reality. So how do you actually communicate in that space? And so if you're not allocating a portion of your budget to try those unknown territories, you'll be left behind and you can't be ahead of the game.
And do you go in areas where not only you haven't been before, but perhaps the technology hasn't evolved yet to what many people think is effective?
Good question. So when I was there in the conference, Scott Brincher, I don't know if you've heard his name, he's the so-called industry proclaimed father of marketing technology. He writes wonderful articles on that, and he talked about a fact that, the MarTech law, what it suggests is the pace at which technology changes are happening currently, and the pace at which organizations adapt to that change, there is a big differential. So the question is that, do you want to be an early adopter? Or do you want to be a fast follower in that space? And depending on the risk appetite of you as an organization, it depends on how much you're going to reap the profits. So let's take an example in banking. So you've got, banking is traditionally very, very slow moving because of, the legislation requirements that you've got, the compliance, the rules and regulations. They are basically guided by boundaries in which they need to operate. And there are many other verticals like banking that have to operate within that governance framework. But if you look at what's happening with open banking, open banking has now been opened in Australia. I think it was July this year.
I think so, yeah.
And what it's allowing to do is basically transfer of data or sharing of data within banks and banks. So we'll touch in that for us.
Is that customer data?
Yes, customer data.
Interesting, okay.
However, there's two things that's going to happen in that space. One is customer data. So if you are a bank, if you're banking with bank A and you want to switch to bank B, yesterday it was very, very hard because to switch a bank across, bringing all your different portfolios of lending and your deposit accounts, your credit card was hard. But with open banking, because you're able to share the data from bank A to bank B, that becomes much, much easier. fast forward that for another 3 to 4 years, where you start looking at multiplying the effects of open banking. What you would see is that you will be able to share your transactional data as well.
Wow.
So what that means is that the other bank, Bank B, would now actually have all your transactional data, and they can basically say, hey, I see you paying for, on this commodity, and we've got a relationship. Ideally, as an average customer, you should be paying $200, but it looks like you're paying $300. You could get a cost saving of $100 if you switch your providers from A to B in that sector. So there's the talk about data is the new oil or the new currency. This is the power of data.
Okay, we need to stop for a second here. Because you just blew my mind right now.
Did I?
So let me get this right. So you're not just talking about data of a specific customer after they have migrated or, they transferred to another bank. You're talking about the status quo, like day to day, Bank A has access to Bank B's data on the customer.
On the customer.
On the regular. So I can then see, your Bank B, I can see your customers and how much, they're paying for various things and how you're charging them. I can then market to that customer and say, hey, you can get that from me in a more convenient or a cheaper way.
Yeah, but once the consent has been given. So it's not available for everyone. You need to give consent to bank. If you're banking with Bank A, you need to give consent to Bank B to do that through an API connection. So it's not available for Bank B to just pounce on Bank A's data.
And the consent is on a customer by customer basis?
Customer by customer basis.
Right. Okay. So like on my bank app, there will be like a consent sort of opt-in or whatever. Once I go, then the other banks can see my data.
Can see your data, yeah.
Okay. And is that something, I find this super interesting. Is that something that the regulatory bodies or body of, the banking system or financial services industry is pushing, or is that an initiative coming from the banks?
I wouldn't be able to comment on that at this stage, whether it's an initiative coming from the banks or is it initiative coming from the regulatory bodies. But I think it's more likely coming from the regulatory bodies in terms of open banking is more about sharing of information. So it's not, the banks wouldn't like it themselves. It's more coming from the regulators to make it happen.
Right, because you want to keep your customers' data in-house. You want to protect.
You don't want to share. So you basically you're sharing your customers' data with your competitors. Your competitors. So the share of wallet. There was a stickiness thing that was talked about. So if you have, and that's the same with telcos and banking. So if you've got a home loan, you want to have the credit card. You want to have a deposit accounts with the same thing. So if you have a broadband, you have a mobile phone and a landline with one telco. Like, now I exactly know where you're banking and what your share of wallet is, and am I your main financial institution driving things in that space or not? I
think that's the same thing with energy, like water.
So you should be able to do that with energy as well. So again, with it's like open banking and open data, it's initially starting with banking.
Yep.
I don't know the year and the date when it will be rolled out for energy providers as well. So gradually, this is going to go across all verticals. And that's why if you're looking at the power of data and the analytics that goes behind it, it's going to be phenomenal.
That changes the entire game.
That changes the entire game. And if you're just maintaining the flavor of banking, so you've got your neobanks.
Yep.
And you've got your digital banks or your fintechs now, technology companies actually investing in banking or financial services. So how do they have an upper hand as compared to traditional banking organizations? So, they're trying to basically get the agile way of working. And what's also happening, if you look at the computing power of computers has gone significantly increased, and the storage capacity has actually increased as well. But the cost of storage has actually decreased.
Yep.
So what they're trying to, the challenge that you've got with larger organizations as compared to startups, whether it's banking or telco or retail, anything which is a startup basically has the ability, the capability, and the access to latest technology. They don't really have legacy systems that they need to carry across.
Yep.
Whereas any other bigger organization, they've got bigger monolithic CRM, ERP systems that need to integrate with these new fancy toys or capabilities that you're bringing in, and how do you actually bring that together?
Yep.
So that's the biggest challenge. So when you read a lot, hey, this organization is really very old and they've got old methods of doing it. But if you look at it in hindsight, it's just like, how do they perform that cleanup? They've got millions of dollars invested in previous legacy systems and technology, and there's a lot of data sitting in there. How do you migrate all of that into a new system and make it happen? So it will happen, but it will take a bit of time.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons a lot of startups are successful, is because they are able to, they're not chained by all these legacy systems or even culture sometimes, because the bigger the organization, generally speaking, it's a lot harder to make decisions, right?
Absolutely.
The less people, okay, guys, what do you think? If it's a startup, 5-10 people, what do you think? Oh, okay, cool, let's do it. Whereas in a big bank, okay, you're talking about meetings, you're talking about board, you're talking about
Not only that, so if you look at let's be talking marketing. So let's get back to the database marketing concept. When you had CRM, initially in the 60s and 70s, when we started talking about CRM, and a lot of organizations said that CRM did not rank up to the scale of where it should have been, and a lot of CRM projects failed. But the reality was that CRM was a monolithic structure that was predominantly for billing capability.
Yep.
Now, fast forward that in 1990, 1990, 2000.
Yep.
You're asking a CRM system which is predominantly built for storage of transactional data to do marketing communication.
Yep. It's not designed to do that.
It's not designed to do that.
Yep.
Whereas compared to the solution that you currently got on the cloud and marketing cloud, there are n number of providers, Salesforce, Adobe, IBM, Oracle, you name it, and they've got a solution to do marketing communication. Through email or SMS or any other digital channel or any other channel, but they're designed to do marketing communication, and they can do that in real time. Well, those legacy CRM monolithic structures were designed to do batch transactions. So the dynamics have changed between what it was built for and what you're asking it to use, and that's where you've got the edge for startups. They're basically using cutting edge technology to do for it's basically good. What's the right the process, the right product, or the right communication.
Do you think for big organizations that have a lot of legacy systems, the best thing to do, and I guess it depends, it's a case by case, but do you think the best thing is to create a digital structure in parallel until it's up to a standard where you can do all the migration and migrate, or how do you go about with big organizations and having I guess millions of data points and hundreds of thousands of customers or tens of thousands of customers? How do you go about migrating to new systems?
Do you really need to migrate it all the time? Can't you have an API or a platform ecosystem that basically can integrate with your existing system and bring everything when required into a new system and basically take it from there? I think there's a platform ecosystem that allows you to do that.
Yep.
So I think organizations are talking about a platform-based ecosystem and connecting APIs with and integrating the different systems that they've got and making them talk.
Right.
So it's not only the one-way API; it's the dual-way API that allows to basically makes the two systems talk with each other.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So, if we go back to campaign optimization for a bit, just before we move on to a few other topics, for anyone who's listening, perhaps a startup or a small business, listening to this and thinking, okay, you know what? You're talking about big scale here. You're talking about
let's get back to reality.
Large campaigns. We can only afford, I don't know, 10K ad budget, or even, sometimes smaller businesses that are really starting from scratch. Sometimes they can probably even spend less than that. So, I guess the point is, if we talk about smaller scale campaigns, would you change some of your strategies, and what would you change?
The first thing, whether whether you're a big organization or a smaller organization, what you should be thinking about when you're trying to do a campaign is actually a problem solving exercise. So the first question that you need to ask is, what is the business problem that we're looking at solving?
Yep.
Is that, are we looking at more traffic? So are we looking at acquisition? Or we've got a leaking bucket, so we're looking at retention. So that's your first thing that you should be looking at, is what's the problem that we're looking at solving. And then you should have a concept and a notion of design thinking or design of experiments in terms of putting yourself in the customer's shoes. And when you're designing a solution, how does it actually perceive from a customer perspective? Those two are fundamental. So I guess we go into campaign and we don't really have a head or tail of what we're really trying to do. So if we have that very, very clear in our head, what's the business problem that we're looking at solving? So for example, let's say retention is our challenge. Then the next question would be, do we have the problem of retention in the entire base? Or there's a segment or there's a sub-segment within a segment where we've got a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can narrow it down. And then you
Yep.
can say, okay, so I've got, of my 100,000 customers that I've got in my customer base, I'm a startup.
Yep.
The 10,000 base, which is, we can have some attributes in there. That's really causing us a bit of grief. And that's where we need to do a fine tuning. And that's how you start looking at baby steps. So you start fundamentally, what's the business problem you're looking at solving?
I guess for startups, it's probably not retention. It's acquisition.
This is acquisition. So how do you actually acquire more customers, and
Yeah.
where do you find those customers? And then if you're actually getting them on different channels, how do you actually synchronize that? For example, because you're always trying to get lists, or, so if you acquire, someone comes on your Facebook, you've got a cookie, and you tag them through, and then you basically put them on Facebook and you retarget them, and you basically look at your retargeting, and then you have your DMPs helping you quantify that customer and basically convert that into a customer. So that's where you're looking at.
Back to your 25% of uncharted territories. Would you advise startups with obviously smaller budgets to do the same? Or would you say, look, you're a startup, look at initially to get traction, look at putting most of your resources, financial mainly, into things that are proven. And as you start to get some customer acquisition through the door, then you can start to slightly, bit by bit.
Yeah, so because you don't really have a proven strategy, you exactly don't know what works for you and what doesn't work for you. So you need to start somewhere. So you need to borrow what's proven in other markets or other verticals, and just try and amplify from there on. So you might not want to basically do a 25% split for innovation or proven technologies. You want to say, okay, 90% I want to put in I'm in this vertical. It seems to work in this vertical, so I'm going to do this. And gradually I'm going to amplify and increase my innovation budget from 10% to 25%. In 6 months' time, I'll ramp it up, but I'll basically go with the test and learn methodology. And that's where, you need to do your test and learn. And the good thing about test and learn should be, how do you do your test and learn? And when you fail, how do you fail fast and come back again? Because there's no point if you're running something and you're testing and you're not learning, and there's no point in learning if you're not basically putting the learnings back into the cycle and improvising on through those learnings.
And just like in life, you have to fail often, but fail small, and not fail big, not fail when it matters, fail when it doesn't matter. So you can translate that same, I guess, concept into your marketing and your marketing campaign by when you test and when you explore new territories, especially if you're a startup again, okay, how much are we going to put into test? What's the bare minimum that we need to put so that we can actually get valid conclusions, or we have enough sample size, or, any of that stuff, without overspending and taking additional risk that we don't necessarily want to take?
That's a good question. So, the concept of test and learn, or test and control, or target and control. So ideally, it's 10% should be your control, and 90% should be your target. So in your case, if you're a startup and you're a small company, you're looking at targeting 10,000 people, and you want to basically start small, and you want to take your risk appetite is low, so you want to target something new, actually. So So you can look at 10% of the base. So maybe 1,000 people are targeted with a new communication, new channel, and you can see how that performs. And 90% is actually going to your trusted media and channels, and how does that perform. So if you see that your 10% is actually performing better than your 90%, then you want to basically increase that to maybe say 20%, then 30%, and gradually, you want to basically make your target your control size.
Yep.
And vice versa. And that's how your champion and challenger strategies work.
Yeah. Totally agree. I'm kind of curious if you're seeing emerging marketing technologies that you admire, or you think are going to be taken over, or you think they're not perhaps yet proven, but got a lot of potential, something you got your eye on. I'm not sure if there's something there to.
There is one thing, so with marketing, the challenge has always been the data. How's data collected, how it's stored, and how it's going to be used? And do we have all the data points required to communicate with the customer, especially in real time? Because you've got data, as we talked earlier, in legacy systems. You've got data sitting in ERP system. You've got data sitting in CRM system. You've got transactional data. You've got behavioral data, structured, semi-structured, first party, second party, third party. All of a sudden, you see you've got 15 different data sources, and what's the unique identifier? And the holy grail what used to be about the single customer view. And how do you provide the single customer view? So if you look at from an analyst perspective, 80% of the time analyst spends on is actually collecting data, and 20% of the time is analyzing data. So how do you actually generate the insights? So if you can turn that around, and 80% of the analyst's time is actually spent in analyzing data, and 20% of the time is left to collecting data, that would be the holy grail in the future. And if you look at CDPs, if you've heard of them, customer data platforms, that is a new technology that's coming in. And what it does is it's user intuitive from a market. It's built, or it's designed to build from a marketer's perspective. So removing the IT as a middleman, to aggregate all those different data sources and create that single point of connectivity and create that single customer view, you are able to drag and drop. It's more of a GUI, a quite intuitive way of drag and drop and be able to do that. That's how it's been currently sold. There's a bit of way early days, but I'm hoping with maturity and time, hopefully CDP should be able to solve that problem of single customer view, and we should be able to leverage that and be able to massage the different data types and data sources that we've got about a customer, get a unified view, and should be able to do real-time targeting and communication.
Right. Real-time targeting as you're collecting the data as well?
Correct.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Let's dive into a little bit about putting marketing strategies together. I think for a lot of established businesses, large enterprises or medium enterprises, marketing strategies are already a lot of times in place and kind of evolving slowly bit by bit. But for startups, marketing strategies are not probably sometimes not existing at all. So what from your experience over the last, 15 years, 10 years, however long you've been in the space, what are the three key or any key principles that you think you need to have an effective marketing strategy?
Let me answer the question in a bit different way.
I like that.
There's a lot of talk about technology.
Yes.
And people are buying a lot of technology and ignoring strategy.
Yep.
I think the first step that you need to do is define your strategy, and based on your strategy, buy the technology.
Absolutely.
So technology is just the enabler. So when we talk about another layer of technology, or with another lens, is automation. Automation, what it does is basically it's a flight to success. It basically allows you to go from point A to point B. In yesterday's world, if it was taking you, say, 10 hours, 10 days, the flight and technology accelerates the whole thing, and you can do that in 5 minutes, milliseconds. You basically reduce your time to market. So that's the technology is an enabler. You need to be grounded in your strategy. So effectively, and again, when I was there at the MarkTech conference, I started off saying to take a step forward, you need to take a step backwards. And the step backward was that the customer is always the focal point for an organization. And it was always the focal point yesterday, it will be today, and it'll be tomorrow as well. So your strategy should be around the customer. So that's where, you got this new notion of people saying, we are a customer-centric organization. Let's take the whole thing again and unwire it. So we talked about optimization. So anything that you're doing, whatever you're doing it for the customer. What value does it generate for the customers? When we're running campaigns, the challenge that we've had with campaigns and why we have to optimize them, I'll take them again where we started from, because there's two things. One is what's the value for the brand and what's the value for the customer. If you look at any campaign that you're running, it's always about the dollar value. We started off saying, what's the revenue that's going to come through? That is all about the value to the brand. We forget about the customer. If we actually switch it around and we say, what's the value to the customer and what steps we need to provide to ensure the customer gets an exponential experience, all of a sudden, because of that experience, they're going to do more and more transactions, and that value for the brand automatically increases. So my one pointer would be, don't really focus on the technology. The technology is the enabler. Focus on the strategy. And your strategy should be the customer. Are we very customer-centric? What are we doing to be customer-centric? Are we walking the talk, or are we just talking the talk?
Are we just saying we're customer-centric, but we're still not really focused on, revenue? And I look, at the end of the day, a business is a business. It's not there to lose money. So, a lot of people, a lot of organizations have and that's the interesting part. When you start to grow and you have different stakeholders, you have investors, you have, a lot of people who have skin in the game, the pressure starts to kind of take the organization and the leaders of the organization away from being customer-centric.
And that's a good point. And so that basically gets into the good topic of culture. So when you look at, so again, when we had mass marketing was equal to product marketing. So it was all about being very product-centric. And we were always thinking the more products you sell, the more revenue you're going to generate. When you started going into data-driven marketing or analytical marketing, it started becoming about the customer. So the more targeted, we had this question of right time, right place, right product.
Place, product,
all the four
promotion,
P's. So that is basically a price concept. Now that we've got is a value concept. And the value concept is what type of experiences are we providing? What's are we empathetic with our customers? Are we providing them an exclusive offer, one-to-one? So how is the offer that you're giving me is different to the offer that you're receiving? I used to work in a casino a while ago, and the whole idea about exclusivity was that if you are a high-end, high roller, right, and you've got $1 million in your pocket, you can basically spin around the world in a couple of hours. When I say couple of hours, I mean in 12 to 24 hours, you can basically be in Sydney, you can be in Vegas, you could be in Singapore, you could be in Hong Kong.
Well, not right now.
Well, at this stage, we've got the COVID restrictions.
Right now you could just take a walk to Star Casino, that's it.
Oh, there you go. So the question was that the customer is actually looking for exclusivity. If you've got $1 million in your pocket, you can basically go to any corner of the world. So why would you go to Casino A as compared to Casino B? The whole idea is that if I get an experience and I get that exclusive experience, money which money can't buy, I'm in for it. So that's where the transition happening from price to value.
Customer experience is the key word here. And so I had an episode with Sean Hall. Shout out to Sean Hall. He's the founder of a company called EnergyX, and basically his focus is how to work with organizations on people's energy, people's mental capacity through removing any the bottlenecks or challenges that kind of drains people, whether it's through culture, whether it's through learning how to deal with stress and things like that. And the whole focus is around minimizing stress and uplifting creativity and improving culture. So my question to you is, how much of that do you see having direct impact on marketing as a function and the entire organization, in terms of, your ability to have high level of creativity and not be held back by, I guess, anything in the organization that can push that down?
Good question, and a difficult one as well.
Yeah.
Talking about culture, I think where we need to take a step back to understand what's actually prohibiting an organization moving forward from a cultural perspective. Is that the fear of failure? And one of the things, how you differentiate between established, well-oiled organization as compared to a startup. A startup is all about, fail fast, and you're trying and being innovative, whereas established organization is basically taking, steps grounded, and, the marginal error, the opportunity to make error is very, very marginal, whereas the risk-taking appetite in a startup is relatively much, much higher. And fail, but fail fast and quickly come back to the whole thing.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the people that are in the organizations, if they've been there for 10 to 15 years, I define it actually in a quadrant way. You know what you know, and then that's a smaller portion. I exactly know what I know. Then I also know you know what you don't know, which is I know that I don't know certain things.
Yep.
The bigger quadrant, again, maintaining that 25 or 50% ratio, you don't know what you don't know, and that's the biggest challenge. Is you just don't know what you don't know. So how technology is evolving, how markets are evolving, is exponentially different to what it was 10, 15 years ago. And that is the biggest block that you've got in culture. That people that have been in the organization, if they've not fundamentally grown themselves with how technology and market have evolved, the opportunity to have a growth mindset, that's the word that we're currently using. You need to have a growth mindset, and how do you actually bring that? The appetite to take risk is not there. So what we need, and how do you bring that into a team is, mistakes are going to happen. So how do you actually encourage people to try new things? So if there's a young member in the team and they know that the management does not like, if you make a mistake, there are repercussions. So no one's actually going to put forward an innovative idea. Same thing, how do you actually reward people when they have innovative ideas coming through? If you don't have that culture, people are not going to come up with new ideas. People are not going to try new ideas because they know if they fail, they're going to be punished. So you need to bring a culture within the organization of how to imbibe that and how to circulate that within the employee base.
When you look at product development and research and development, there's always an allocation of funds to working on things, and you don't have any expectations if they're going to work or not.
How many organizations have that? If you look at Google, Apple, they are significantly ahead of the curve in looking at product development in that space.
The point I was trying to make is, when you look at marketing, a lot of times, because in marketing, when you try to market something, there's a part of you that's going back to, your 25%. You have to step outside of what you do and try new things. And try new things make you vulnerable for, things that may not work, and obviously wasting money or whatever. So I when I look at a parallel, when I look at product development versus marketing, a lot of times I feel like marketing is at the shorter end of the stick, where everyone is expecting 100% of what you do works, when it's not actually designed to be that way. There should be, and I think that ties also to the culture. in terms of expectations and empowering people who bring creativity, people who bring new ideas to say, okay, let's give that a go. You don't know, but let's give all these different ideas a go.
Yeah. So there's a concept called liquid customer expectations. I don't know if you come across that.
No, I haven't.
So liquid customer expectation is all about, when we were talking about customer experience and product development, everyone's notion was that if I'm in banking, how my current bank treats me, or the experience that I get from my own bank, I try to compare that with the other banks.
Yep.
If I'm a telco, the experience that I get with my telco, I'm expecting, all telcos behave like that.
Yep.
Then you've got these new players, for example, Amazon, Netflix, Uber. They've actually revolutionized the whole experience phenomenon. So the experience that they provide you is, digital, exponential, customer first, and first time resolution. They're trying to basically circulate that mind shift change, that this is the customer experience that you should be expecting, not only when you're actually transacting and interacting with Amazon or Netflix. It should be across every vertical or every touch point or every organization that you're doing with.
They're raising the bar on.
They're raising the bar, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So the experience that you get with Amazon, so next time you walk into your bank, you want the same thing. The next time you talk to your energy provider, you want the same. Like Uber basically does that. So when you book a cab from Uber, you exactly know the driver, you exactly know the make and model of the car, where it's actually in transit, when it's turning, how many minutes away is it coming from. You order a pizza. People basically want the same experience. They want to know when the pizza is arriving. They want to see how it's actually getting made. When it's actually in the oven.
Yep.
Apologies.
It's all right. It's okay. That is absolutely okay. That's a cool ringtone.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so you're talking about you're talking about the expectations being up high from all the disruptors in other industries, and how that has made customers expect that from businesses in every other vertical.
Correct.
Yeah. Was there something else on that?
I think that's exactly what liquid customer expectation is all about. So the experience that you actually get in one vertical, you want that a seamless experience across all verticals. So it's no boundaries.
I just had a question that just kind of came to me now on a topic that we were talking about earlier. In campaign optimization, there's this reality that the cost of advertising is increasing in certain places, or in most places, if not all. When you discover that a channel or a form of advertising is effective, eventually more and more businesses start to flock to it, and then it hits a point where it's too expensive, right?
Was Facebook an example of that?
Look,
or you had more traffic coming on Facebook, so would you say that diluted the advertising expense on being done on a channel?
Yeah, I guess the way I'm trying to address this is generally speaking. But if you want an example, I would say Google search ads have become increasingly expensive, especially in certain verticals, for example. Now, when you look at campaign optimization, and obviously you're trying to improve the ROI, the return on ad spend, get more sales, is increasing the general trend of the cost per click or cost per impression going up. Is that a main concern, and do you look at different ways to deal with that? Are you trying to look at how, and to deal with that, are you focusing more on customer experience and increasing conversions, or are you focusing more on the front end by improving your creative to get more clicks so that you mitigate that? Like, how do you approach that?
I don't directly lead into the digital sales, the top of the funnel. So I don't have much experience to talk about the top of the funnel and the CRO that you get, or pay-per-click, or PPC ads. But you touched on two different points. One is the creativity, and I'll actually talk a bit more about the data element, because I primarily focus more on the data and analytics side of things. So, there used to be a time called content is king. Right. So because if content is king, then is data the queen. So the whole is that is it content led or analytics led?
Right.
So I guess from a targeting perspective, so just if I answer the question in a different way, is that how sophisticated do you get into your targeting, and how do you create a segment of one? And if you get to that point of creating a segment of one, that's where you start getting a bit more precise in your targeting. And
segment of one. What does that mean?
What that basically means is when you do, so again, going back to our example of mass marketing, so you basically have the same offer in your product management space going to the entire customer base. Then what you try to do, you segment your customer base. So let's say you've got 5 different segments. And segment 1 would receive offer 1, segment 2 would receive offer 2, and so on and so on.
Right.
With a segment of 1, basically what you're trying to say is that you're pretty much trying to do real-time marketing, so in-moment marketing. So what that means is, rather than having a predefined offer that has been pre-composed by a product manager, you've got n number of offers in your library, and based on the interaction the customer does with the organization at that point in time, the offer which is best suited for that customer gets rendered or displayed to a customer. That's, so you're trying to do hyper personalization, and moving absolutely away from mass marketing to really being sophistication of targeting. And this will evolve more and more as we have the algorithms of artificial intelligence and machine learning coming in play.
And is this offering in real time more done on the like the areas where you have control, like your website, for example? So if you're a bank and you know this person or this visitor has come to your site, and you have this data about them, you show a specific messaging or an offer right then and there, or is it also on the ad level?
Also, it should be also on the ad level. Programmatic, I don't have much experience in programmatic, but I think programmatic is trying to do that. So let's try to take an example. So in-moment marketing is, if I'm looking for a product, I've got a shelf life. And if let's say if I'm buying a car. If I'm in the market for a car and you render me ads about a car, I'm receptive for receiving it. Once I bought the car, there's no point displaying an ad for a car.
Of course.
So how do you actually figure out that I'm actually in market for a car? So that's where your in-moment marketing and segment of one comes in place. So, and digital is relatively quite sophisticated in making that happen through programmatic and other technologies that renders the ad based on the conversation. For example, I was doing a case study quite a while ago. Me and you are talking about cars, for example, and we are chatting about it. So the chat windows is picked up new cars. How does that data get ingested into your systems? And you say, looking at, okay, Satya and Rami are talking about cars, so let's display when they basically log on to their website. You've got your DSPs and SSPs, and put that through, and you render an ad for a car.
I think the final question I have for you, or that I just kind of wanted to explore with you, is how much, because we talked about data a lot today, and I always think about whether data is, like, everyone can agree that data is super important in enabling, right, organizations and your marketing strategies. How much do you think privacy and regulation, and I guess that's a very tough one, but we can kind of explore it together, unless you have some direct insights on it. How much do you think regulations around privacy will be challenging or hold back marketing technologies around data to enable customer experience?
Good question. It's a hard. So I talked about that in the My MarkTech conference. So there's two elements to that. So we need to firstly differentiate between data privacy and data security. And when we talk about those two things, they are intertwined and interlinked, but there is a distinct separation between them. So data privacy is when I provide you as an organization, I provide my data that you've collected. How do you actually use it for monetization? And do you actually share that with, and do you have the rights to share, and have you had my permissions to share? And the other one is marketing permissions. So even if you have my data, for you to talk to me for marketing purposes, have I said yes or no? That's marketing permission. That's data privacy. Data security is that you've got my consent to hold my data, but how are you actually protecting it within the four walls of your organizations and behind the firewalls of your IT systems, that you don't have hackers coming in
and it ends up on the news
and basically taking episodes. So that's the clear differentiation. And I guess people are so that's the question. So the question is, a customer is actually asking an organization, you're collecting a lot of data, a lot of information about me, but what are you doing? So if you're using that data, or not actually monetizing, but if you're using that data that's going to benefit me as a customer, I'm happy for you to do that.
I'm all for it.
But if you're using my data and you're selling it to someone else, becoming second party and third party data, I'm not happy about that. And that's where the regulations are holding organizations. You've got the GDPR in Europe, you've got the ACMA in Australia, you've got the California Act in the US. That's where they're tightening it. I think recently Marriott got fined about in excess of $20 million of data breaches. And we basically hear all on and off about organizations being fined for data breaches. So that's the differentiation. And I guess coming back to my point of, how much data you're collecting about me and how you're using it, that is going to be the key differentiator of organizations in the future. Because the whole idea is that, what I call it, that know me, recommend me, and then deliver that experience. So effectively what Amazon and Netflix are trying to do, they're trying to play in that data space of monetizing it and using it for the customer's benefit in terms of the recommendation engine that they're building, and the next best product, the next best offer, the next best conversation. That's all dependent on that. So if you're using it for that purposes, I guess the customer is going to say, I'm all in for it. But if not, then the customer is going to question you.
Totally agree. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to dive into?
I think we've touched on a couple of things, or actually a number of things. We started with campaign optimization. We spent a bit of time on that. Then we divulged into data in terms of how data is created, stored, and used. Then we've talked a bit about culture, organization, and then we finished. We're trying to wrap it off with data privacy and security. So I think we've summed it up very well. All these topics among themselves are a topic for a podcast, but we'll leave that for another day, another time.
Well, Satya, we can have you as a regular episode. We can, talk about each and every one of these at a time. I certainly enjoyed this conversation, so thank you so much.
It's a pleasure having
me.
And
I hope everyone else who will get the chance to listen to this find a lot of value and help their organization to take the right steps within anything in their marketing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.